Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Today's episode, I have thoughts on act breaks and other imaginary things. My name is Glenn Gers, and I am the chief everything of Writing for Screens. I created this website and this YouTube channel in order to teach some things that I learned in a 25-year career writing for TV and movies. On my way out of the business, I am trying to leave behind some of the tools and skills and techniques and insights that I got so that you don't have to figure them out for yourself. You can take them and see if they help you. That is the key. Nothing here is the right way to do it. It's just a way to do it, and lots of different ways to do it, because the truth is every writer has to figure out for themselves what kind of work they want to do, what kind of career they want to have, what kind of situation they are in realistically, and what kind of art they want to make. Those are all things you have to figure out for yourself. There is not an answer out there that some teacher is going to tell you. You have to decide. What I'm here to do is give you some tips on how to do that, how to figure out the mechanics so that you can make the choices for yourself. Not everything I'm going to say is going to be right for you. That's okay. Now, I come to you here live every Wednesday for an hour at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone to do these little discussions of thoughts and to answer questions live from people who are chatting, or to take emails that I've gotten and answer those questions. But the core of this channel, the juicy good stuff, is here on, this is a screen grab of my channel page, and if you look down at the bottom, you'll see playlists. These playlists, here's the first three of them: Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. These three first playlists have about 50 10-minute videos. This is the stuff. I beg you, look here first. If you have a question, if you have a problem, before you think, oh, I want to try and get him to help me, look here, because I'm pretty much sure I already helped you. It's there. All you got to do is look. The thumbnails and the titles all say what they're talking about. Try them out. Look into them. 10-minute videos. Everything that I could think of to tell you. Okay, let me do some hellos. Hello, Helen. Hello, Maratatoso and Atanu. Very good to see you all here. Hi, Donna. Hi, Sonia. Hi, Nathan. Sometimes we win the Pulitzer, sometimes we don't. We just keep going on. Great, Ricky. I am very glad. Hello, Michael. Okay, everybody. So here's the deal. This is one of those episodes where I'm going to talk about a couple of topics that I have in my mind. Towards the end, I will open it up to free-for-all questions. Right now, the first topic is I have thoughts about act breaks and other imaginary things. Here's the deal. I'm going to talk about how this all came to be. First of all, spoiler alert. There's going to be spoilers in this discussion about the plots of Psycho and Taxi Driver. Here, I was reading an internet debate, an internet argument in comments about whether or not Travis dies at the end of Taxi Driver. At the end of Taxi Driver, in the last act, there is a very violent shootout. The hero is badly wounded, and then we cut to a little time later, and we see that he has recovered and is being considered a hero, although it is very much a matter of opinion whether or not he is a hero or a psychopath. So one of the commenters in this bunch of internet comments was aggressively insisting that that was impossible. It was just so absurd to think that the world would view this violent man as a hero, that must be his fantasy as he is dying from his wounds in the shootout. That the entire end of the movie is simply his last vision of himself as he is dying. Now, that is actually not an impossible interpretation. It's kind of hard to sustain in terms of the problem is that the storytelling all the way through is very hallucinatory. So it's hard to tell when you're in somebody's mind or not anyway. However, both the writer, Paul Schrader, and the director, Martin Scorsese, have said they did not intend for that to be a fantasy sequence. They were telling the story of a man who did these horrible things and was celebrated as a hero at the end. They have said the events are real as far as their intention and what they filmed. To which, by the way, this commenter said, I know they said that, quote, come on, guys, bullshit. Sorry for the cursing, but that's what the commenter said. Now, this brings up a really interesting question. You can interpret as you please. Once a work of art exists and is shown to the public or to anybody, that person interprets it as they interpret it. You can say that the authors are wrong about their own work. You can say they don't understand what they did. That is a completely legitimate interpretation as an audience member. But as writers, we have to sort out how we're going to deal with this problem, because all of writing teaching is done by interpretations instead of focusing on creation. In other words, they will say, look, in this story, they did this and it means this, therefore you should do that. There's an awful lot of teaching in which they break down scripts and say, this is the structure, that structure is what you need. This is where I have a problem. This came up last week when someone asked a question towards the end of the hour about Robert McKee's interpretation of the movie Psycho. Once again, spoilers. The main character of the first 45 minutes of Psycho is murdered. And then the question is, well, who's the protagonist? If the protagonist is killed in the first 45 minutes, then who's the next hour? Who's the protagonist? And there is one interpretation. Robert McKee said, this is an interesting matter of structure, because really the action is taken over by two different characters. There's the victim's sister and a detective who has been hired to investigate. Now, my viewer had an alternative reading, which is that the murderer becomes the protagonist. I thought that was fascinating. These are all really interesting ways to think about it. There's also a very good argument that the detective is simply a tool of the sister, and the sister is the main character, especially because the detective gets killed too. But the thing that we need to understand from all of this is protagonist, act, genre, theme, character flaws, all these things that people teach you as these are the basic elements of screenwriting. They have no objective existence. You cannot do a test and say this makes somebody a protagonist. Not even being the main character. I mean, The Great Gatsby, spoiler once again, kind of spoiler. It is narrated by a guy named Nick. It is about a guy named Gatsby. The main action is taken, in theory, by Gatsby. But Nick is the one who's telling the story and whose life it affects. Who's the protagonist? There is an argument to be made for either one. The point about this is, it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong here. It's not like you can do, look at a skeleton and say, okay, the bone that goes between the knee and the hip, that's a certain bone. You can call it that. That's a testable thing. If that thing's there, that is I think it's a humerus, maybe a tibia. I don't know. Anyway, the point is that bone is that bone. And a substance which has a certain amount of molecules is a certain thing. There are facts. Whether or not someone is the protagonist and whether or not the protagonist has to do certain things, this is just a theory. It's just an opinion. It's an interpretation. Just like you can say that Travis is dying and having the fantasy, it's an interpretation, and you are allowed as an understander, as an audience of the work, to choose what that is. But that's not how you write. You don't write by figuring out the protagonist or deciding on the protagonist. Those are useful tools that you can use, but they do not by themselves ensure that you are telling a story that works, or that without them it won't, because Psycho and Taxi Driver work without them. The whole point about this is that there are certainly industry conventions that you should know. And most of these teachers who are breaking down structural analysis and who's the main character and what the main character has to do and how a story has to work, those things are not real. They are useful, just like, any form of, society. Like, it's not like, the government is a thing. It's a thing that people agreed upon and worked with, but it doesn't exist without that agreement. And likewise, anything in a story can happen or cannot happen. You don't need to figure out how it fits into this absolute formula. That is the important thing that I'm trying to get to. What happens is there are certain things that become relatively popular or relatively easy to understand, and they tend to be the ones that are taught, okay? However, there are no actual protagonists. There's no such thing as a protagonist test, okay? Every single teacher will tell you a different set of rules about these things. Some people will say the protagonist is the one who has a goal. Other people will say the protagonist is the one who has the most to lose, or whatever it is. People just make stuff up about these ideas. They are not real. They are tools. And that is the thing I want you to understand. Rules are tools. Anything that someone's saying about an act break or a protagonist or a genre is certainly something to think about as a potential tool for you to use, but the only point of having a protagonist in your head is whether or not that helps you figure out what you want to happen in your story. Maybe you'll have your protagonist die in the middle. Maybe you'll have your protagonist something else. That's not going to break their protagonistness. Okay? The point is that these are things that you can use to think about the story that you have not yet figured out. And if they fit to the vision and style and artistry that you are bringing, then you use it to help you. But if it is not, don't worry about it. Remember, it is made up. It is not something you have to do. That is really, really the key that I want to get across here, is that does not mean these things are bad. It's not bad to think about it. It's just important to remember that they are tools. Now, that you can judge an interpretation. You can say, hey, like if you want to interpret the Taxi Driver is about man's discovery of deep undersea palaces, you can interpret it that way, but it's going to be really hard to show in the text anything that actually refers to that. So there are ways that we judge interpretation, but those are just our choices. We can say we don't like that. Some people would say the value of a work is whether or not it affects society in a certain way, and whether it shows humanity a certain behavior. That's one way to interpret whether a story is working or not. The important thing about this is that what I'm trying to get across to you is, as a writer, you are using these concepts of main character, protagonist, acts, climaxes, goals, objectives, even the ones that I talk about. I'm really, really trying to make clear. Even my 6 questions and my other things, they are not absolute. They are simply tools for you to see if they help you to say, I want to write these scenes in this order. I want to write these ideas, these characters. That's how you decide. The important thing about this is that there is no right answer, and we have no need to fight over it. Okay? If Robert McKee wants to say that the protagonist splits in 2, that's Robert McKee's version. And if he was writing it, he would write it that way. Okay? If you are writing something, you make that choice. If someone else wants to view it a different way, they are allowed to. You are not right or wrong. You do not have to force someone else to believe your interpretation. You can simply say, this is my interpretation. I recognize that you may or may not believe it, that you may see it a different way. You are allowed to do that. This is really important for a writer to recognize that these interpretations, which are being taught as how to write, that's the only thing that bothers me. I don't care if people interpret it however they do. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is when people say, I'm going to interpret all stories as needing the character to learn something. That's just not true. And it's important that we recognize that is a made-up belief, okay? All of these things are made up. They are not real. They are just ideas, interpretations. Now, when I say that, for instance, there is no objective truth of a person, of a character, okay? And in a real world, you cannot say, my uncle is a, master criminal because he, stole something from a store, okay? You might feel like he's a master criminal, and your interpretation of him could be that, and you can tell that story, but that does not mean that he actually is. In his feelings or in someone else's feelings, it may be very different, okay? There is not an actual right or wrong version of a person or an event in stories or in life. The reason I say this is not to say there's no meaning to anything, the exact opposite, okay? Your choices, your interpretation, your decision on how you see this, that is everything. We create and define our work and ourselves. We stand or fall by these choices, okay? If you say, my character is going to do this because that is what this protagonist needs to do, you are making a choice and defining it. And then someone may interpret it differently, but for the writing, you need to make that choice. That choice is everything. Your decision on whether or not the protagonist leaves in the middle or has to learn something is your decision on what story you are telling. And that's the thing I just really, really wanted to emphasize to you, okay, is that the reason that we care that these things have no existence is that these rules that people make, these interpretations on works, they are just tools. They are just ways to try to shape a story that you think makes sense. And that choice, that judgment on these events and these people is everything you've got. That is what makes your work. Okay, I'm going to take a minute here before I change topics a bit and read some comments. Okay. Progressing on page 32 of a new script. Despite my love for structure, the script is flowing without an outline. As you said, sometimes I find it essential. Great, Marital Tozo, this is exactly what I'm saying. Yes, if you are just going, what's happening there when you are writing without an outline is you are making the connections and stuff and you're just holding them in your head. Essentially, you are figuring out the outline either as you go or you figured it out enough that it's in your head and you don't have to worry about it. All good. You don't need to have an outline to write. I offer them as a way to solve problems when you can't write. But if you are writing without an outline and it's coming out good, done. End of story. You are doing the right thing. That is great to hear. Also great to hear that Arfang is having dinner in Spain. When the art of a thing surpasses its form. In other words, you mean when a thing, honestly, the art of all things surpasses its form. Once a thing exists, we can judge it so many ways. And especially the way to look at that is when you go back to really primitive art, when you go back to like mythology. Like, we have no idea, A, what the people who created those myths meant to do, or how the people who were getting them at the time used them. We don't really know. We think so, and we've got some written evidence of that. But the truth is, that is entirely a weird object that we interpret in our own way. And different generations and different cultures and different individuals will interpret those myths very, very differently. And that's the point of art. That's exactly right. Story first, then character. No, not absolutely not. No first or second. There is no rule. That is what I am saying. If you are working and character is coming first, great, then figure out the story. If your story is coming back first, great, figure out the characters. There are no right or wrong ways to do it. There are only different tools that you use to shape the one that you are trying to make. I like how, yes. Yeah, this is what's bothering me is that people are like I was watching this internet fight about Taxi Driver and thinking these people were mad. It's like, and this is a problem of people, and it's exacerbated by the internet, but arguments become wars that have to be won instead of opinions that have to be shared. It is someone's opinion that Taxi Driver ends with the death. That's actually kind of interesting. When it becomes, you are an idiot because you don't agree with me, that's when I have a problem. And teachers tend to, it is part of the teaching method, which is both beautiful and horrible, is that they tend to teach in this way of saying, I am looking at these great works of art and figuring out how they did it, interpreting, that means they are interpreting how they did it, and telling you from that. This is why I really, people are constantly asking me to spend my time breaking down stuff. I did it a little bit, but on a very technical version for The Verdict. But mainly, it's a bad thing to be doing as a teacher. It is a good thing to be doing as an artist. If you want to look at how Psycho or Taxi Driver or My Fair Lady works and say, what does that do to what I'm trying to do? That's good. That's the proper use of it. When you say, I have figured out the method and I'm telling you guys how to do that, that's when you have to have a grain of salt. Hello, Nacho. Sometimes scripts are not necessary to form a movie as well. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm actually working on one of these things about, you can make movies without scripts entirely. There is absolutely no law that says you need a script. Hi, Doreen. Nice to see you. Hello, Mark Burton. Yes, I'm cracking along here. Thank you. Yes, Vertigo is a strange movie. I don't think that there's any argument. Vertigo is a really good case for like interpretation is required. Hello, Crawea. Thank you. Gave my notice at work. Wow, good for you. Saving my outlining my screenplay. My advice is get something done. My other advice is recognize that at the end of 4 months, even if you have written the greatest screenplay in the history of the world, you will need to get another job. Okay? This is a great question. When do we bet everything on our art and not make a living? My answer would be, in general, you always need to sustain your life. You need to take care of your life first before you do your art. Now, Crawea has got money. They have put aside money for a hunk of writing time. My advice would be, you've got an outline, get your scenes done. Even if they are bad, get a rough draft done in your 4 months. Ideally, in 4 months, maybe you can do a draft and then rewrite it. Everybody's different. But I would say the thing to recognize is when you run out of cash, you're going to need to take a job again. Because even if it was the greatest screenplay on earth, it won't bring in money right away. It's not like you can take your screenplay out and sell it to the pawn shop. Every artist needs to find a way to pay the bills, to sustain themselves. That is never going to stop. Even if you are a professional writer who is making money from writing, you'll find that that's your job, that's your day job. And you very often have to take writing assignments, if you are lucky enough to be offered them, that you don't want to do, that are not the kind of writing you want to do, because that's your job. You have to do your job to pay your rent. But however, Crawea, I am very impressed that you have organized it in this way, because it seems like a healthy thing. All I would say is, while you have your free time, make sure you get your work done every day, and that you, when you are not working, that you try to enjoy your life and not feel pressure about that. It's just one of the things about being a creative artist. You have to learn to get your work done, and you also have to learn when to not do your work and to live your life. That's a really, really key part of having an ongoing creative experience. On Kar-Wai's genius level is yes. Yeah. I mean, many people would say that his movies are hard to understand. And that's the point. I was going to talk about this about Scorsese, but Wong Kar-Wai is certainly a good example too. There are some people who believe that the rules of writing are entirely different than the rules that the teachers are saying, this is the rule of a script. A script has to do that. I was reading an interview with Martin Scorsese, who's 80 now, and he has always believed in a very personal, non-formulaic filmmaking goal. Like the whole point of film is to create these works of art, like Wong Kar-Wai and many others. The problem is that those are not easy to sell. They're probably not going to be that popular. They're not going to make that much money. They won't keep the studio afloat, and they certainly won't keep the studio from buying Rolls Royces. So the tricky thing about this is that there is like I said, there's a business to be attended to, and I don't want to pretend that doesn't have expectations to fit a certain formula at a certain time. Those formulas keep changing. That's the main thing you have to recognize. Every teacher who says there is some universal formula that once you've learned it, you're set, that is simply provably not so. My point is, it is very wasteful and dangerous for a writer to spend their time trying to fit into a formula and to debate whether or not this movie or that movie proves the formula right or wrong. You got to make your formulaic movie work as best you can. Everything else is for the coffee shop and the classroom and the YouTube video. And if you want to sit around and debate it with your friends or your enemies, cool. But that's a separate thing from writing. Wong Kar-Wai, Scorsese, many, many other film artists, they feel that the thing they need to do is create a work from their instincts, and then your job is to interpret it. The thing about a formula is that it wants to tell you how to interpret it. When you have a formulaic movie, you are being told what you need to think and what you need to know. That's actually very reassuring. It's very pleasurable. It's fun. I do not want to say that one of these ways is better than the other. What I do want to say is that you need to figure out your balance of working within the formula and breaking the formula. Your personal instinct could be to do the most formulaic thing in the world. Cool, do that. That's not a problem. The point is to recognize what these interpretations are so that you can use them as a writer, not to test whether or not you're getting it right. That's my point. Okay, hold off on the comments for a minute, okay? What do I think about instructors who keep referring to the theories of Aristotle? This is the extreme example of what I'm saying. Aristotle, hold on. Aristotle is mostly inappropriate at this point. The theories of Aristotle apply to the culture of Aristotle. They are not. They are basically useless in our culture. There was a time when people, about 150 years ago, where people spent a lot of time trying to take the theories of Greek and Roman philosophers and various scholars and say these are the original truths, and that therefore they must be right now. And they're simply not. Aristotle is full of nonsense. There's some interesting ideas in Aristotle. There's some basic good, shots there, here and there of like, oh, that's true. Most of Aristotle is useless to anybody in the 21st century. Teachers who keep referring to that are indicating that they are living in academia. They're living in a world where there is a hierarchy of knowledge based in what the Western Europeans call the classics. This is simply not true. Aristotle was not a good screenwriter. Okay. How will future civilizations interpret? Well, even now there's already multiple interpretations, and that is cool. Okay, have you ever watched Hong Kong? No, I never have. Change it into, there is a good argument. This is an interesting interpretation. The music specifically suggests it's already a horror movie. And Scorsese, in many ways, was trying to make clear that he was making a horror movie. So, it's a horror movie with a lot of heart and soul, but it is. What about horror has to have two endings, rule or tool? I've never even heard that one, but it doesn't matter. There are no rules. There's only tools. If you're saying that there needs to be like a little stinger ending after, that's just a convention. That's just a trick that's getting used up. The Exorcist didn't have two endings. Okay. I published my children's mystery novel yesterday. Yay! Congratulations. 6 years. I finished it because I was willing to drop some of the rules. In the end, didn't work for my... Yes, good. Congratulations, Donna. I am happy to hear that. That is great. I felt Scotty died in the opening scene. He was left hanging. He's chasing the ghost. In Vertigo. I got it. Yeah, kind of. I mean, we can, I really don't like to interpret works. I don't think it's helpful to you. I mean, there's not a right or wrong. If you feel that, then that is your feeling and you need to work from that. And I'm happy to discuss these things, but you have to recognize I am just a person with an interpretation like anybody else. There is no value as a writer to trying to figure out which interpretation is right or wrong. That is, it's only what's right or wrong for you at this moment in the work you are doing. Wrote the fourth version of my TV pilot drafts. Well, just keep working. Keep doing it. Yes, we admire your commitment and we wish you the best. Good luck. Just no matter what, write something in that time. You'll have fun. I've never heard of Peter Wallen, but good for him. Cool. Donna Nelson, congratulations. Yes, indeed. I know I should have 100. Well, hopefully, and over time, every month I get about 500 more. I'm working my way up there. Yes, congratulations, Donna Nelson. Yeah, Macquarie, he does have some interesting commercial. Hold on. Hello, T. Trent. The why I make a movie is for myself. The how is for everyone else. That's actually an interesting way to put it. Yeah. That only is true if you are identifying an audience. Like Wong Kar-wai is identifying a different audience who has expectations that they need to fulfill. Those expectations are for a certain amount of chaos and need for interpretation. But yes, Macquarie also is rationalizing his deep commitment to the studio industry. But I think Macquarie is a good writer. I think he wastes a lot of his time. But I'm not writing billion-dollar franchises, so who am I to say? Blaine, hello, Blaine. Nice to have you back, indeed. Congratulations, Donna. Congratulations, Karwe. All of you. This is great. Okay, I want to do, yes, congratulations. Okay, so here's the deal. I want to take on one other topic today, which is called control versus capture. What this basically is here is I've had on my mind, there's a lot of things which I consider balances. In other words, that there are things in life, and especially in art, where there's not a right or wrong. It's not like art and business, formula and personal instinct. These are not things where you just choose which one you're going to do. You always are balancing because there is no universe in which you can be purely one or the other. Everything is about mixing, blending, proportions, all of that stuff. So the thing about this is, I recently saw a photo from the set of the TV series Winning Time. It's on HBO. It's about the rise of the LA Lakers team in the 1980s to the pinnacle of their achievements. The thing is that this person was somebody I know who had posted on Facebook a behind the scenes photo of them shooting basketball scenes in a basketball arena. One of the things I happen to think the show is excellent, and one of the things about it is that it's filmed in a very chaotic, 15 different film stocks, constantly cutting between film stocks and angles in such a way that gives an impression of reality, when in fact everything in it is manufactured. There is nothing real in this documentary drama. And this shot was of the sound stage, because it turned out all the basketball scenes, which are very ornate and beautiful and amazingly done, are done in a giant sound stage, and then the various different arenas and crowds and stuff are put in post. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because this concept of green screen, let me just show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, this is a still from The Great Gatsby, the movie The Great Gatsby. The point about it is, obviously it's a manufactured image. Here's the behind the scenes part of it. Okay, now this is once again green screen. In other words, in a soundstage, they built this big marquee so that they could have the lights, and they have the actual cars. If you look, there's like half a dozen or more, there's like 10 cars, 10 ancient 1920s cars, and these people in these costumes, and this marquee for the to have that lighting element be in the shot. Okay, then everything else is put in digitally. Okay, now that is kind of a smart way to make The Great Gatsby, because The Great Gatsby is set in a world that no longer exists, like Winning Time is, and that's pretty cool. Here, there's another one with The Wolf of Wall Street. This is a scene where they're going to a yacht in Italy, and actually they were apparently on a soundstage, and the yacht was on a soundstage, and that's cool. And once again, the reasoning is basically, in order to film on a yacht, and in order to have that yacht go through a horrible storm, which it does, you're going to need to manufacture within your control those circumstances. And that's really what I'm talking about here, is the amount of control that is now basic to most filmmaking. But here's a still from a TV show. It's about, 7 or 8 years old now, called Ugly Betty. What's fascinating about this is just a man trying to interview Ugly Betty. She walks out of her office building on the street. They did that green screen too. Okay? Now this is fascinating, because that, as far as I can tell, it may be in New York Street. It may actually be in LA Street. It's hard to tell. The point is, I believe that what happened was they were filming in LA, and it was just far less expensive to go to a studio, do the green screen, grab the street, and put them together than it would be to fly everyone to New York to do this shot. Once again, a completely legitimate reason to manufacture an image, but in that case, it's an image that you literally could have gone out on the street and captured. And this is what I wanted to talk about, is this concept here, because over the past 10, 20 years, the concept of directorial control of films as things that are completely manufactured has become sort of the standard ideal of filmmaking. What you really want is an artist who can create an entire world. In fact, most of the time, it seems that it's preferred if this can be an imagined world. If you build everything on a set and you have everyone do their costumes and everything, you control every element. And that is highly celebrated. If you shoot out on the street, you have to capture what's going on. So that's the difference, the question of controlling what's in the film and capturing what's in the world in your film. Now, there are very legitimate philosophical arguments for the value of each side. What's bothering me is that in the past 20 years or so, control has become the good thing, the ideal thing. Capturing is considered cheap and considered kind of lazy. And I think that what's happened is partly this has happened because we can, because technology has changed to the point that you can, in fact, create a background, take a building out of the background. You can do all this stuff. And there is a beauty to that. There's also a beauty to the power of those controls. In other words, there's no ambiguity. There's no question of what to think or feel when the sky has been made the color you want and the distractions have been taken out. That is part of the beauty of movies, in theory. But there's also what's going on is a certain enthronement, power, hungriness, arrogance of the filmmakers. An idea that the greatest artist is the one who completely wipes out reality and replaces it with their own. And obviously, I think there's also a value to escapism. We want to escape from reality. And these choices, doing this stuff, tinting the color and changing the lighting, those help you to escape, to feel it's not real, which is very important. The thing I want to do here is just put a little vote in for the value of capture, for the value of shooting on the street, and if there's an ugly truck in the background, there's an ugly truck in the background. And this is complicated because we always have some element of artistic control. You're choosing the frame. You're usually lighting it. You're messing with the costumes and you're making things happen, and that's fine. You are always, like I said, it's a balance. Winning Time is a really fascinating example because they're not trying to escape from reality. They're trying to capture a reality that no longer exists. In other words, Winning Time is trying to appear to be a documentary filmed 30 years ago. As such, they have to manufacture every detail. So trying to be real has made them 100% false. Is that may be the best way to be real, but it's also not. It's also, once again, a lie. It's an interpretation. And I just want to point this out because no one seems to be talking about the value of the way that our technology can capture our actual lives, our actual reality, the way that people talk and live, the way that things happen in our world. That is less and less appealing. Even, quote, reality shows are heavily lit, heavily made up, totally controlled. When you see an indie film or when you work on an indie film, one of the most interesting things now is how much terror that even indie films have of capturing reality. If you work on a low-budget indie film in the American business, the producers will tell you you cannot show any street signs, any stores, any t-shirts with logos on them, even though our experience of life is that people wear t-shirts with logos on them. But legally, they don't have the right to that logo, and so they need to make sure that nobody's wearing that, which means they need to control every person in the shot. If you look back at the history of film, there are certain waves in the silent era and in the 60s and 70s when people shot on the streets and they caught reality. And those waves have a really powerful vision of their own. And in fact, what's fascinating is that winning time is desperately trying to manufacture under complete control that aesthetic. The reason I'm talking about this is because if you are making films outside of the business, if you don't have the big money who can stop, like if you want to shoot on a street, you need to stop every car and person on that street and replace them with people you've hired and you can control. That's how they shoot on the street now. Even indie films, if they are most low-budget films, still will try to completely control every single person because they don't want to have somebody walk through and sue the filmmakers. And I am not giving legal advice, okay? I do not know the legal ramifications of letting someone wear a t-shirt in your movie. What I do know is that when you are working without a lot of money, when you're working with the kind of budget you can pull together out of your own pocket, you need to use the power of capture, the power of filming what's real and using what's real as your texture, as your world building with reality is how no budget gets made. And I just urge you to take seriously the value and figure out the legal idea, figure out the legal part, look into it on the internet. But what I am saying is, in the history of the art form, this idea of total control is limited to parts of the business that were entirely controlled by business. Right now and in the studio era, that's when there's total airless control showed up. And there is something really powerful about just shooting in a real house, shooting on a real street, grabbing a scene in a real restaurant before they open or on a day when they're closed. It's really, really powerful, and it's the only way you can afford to do it. So learn that aesthetic. Don't spend your time trying to create a controlled aesthetic when you are working in an economy of capturing. That's the other thing I wanted to say here. I'm going to now go back and look at a lot of comments. Yes, I just forgot. I made a note to myself. I'm going to do that later. Yes, I was. What would you say make the audience feel like they are in good hands? See, this is once again a matter of interpretation. The things that I feel that are very different than things that Scorsese or Wong Kar-wai or Terrence Malick would say. They would say sometimes the poetry, the poetic quality is what does it. For me, there's a certain amount of steering the attention to the characters and the story, making sure that we understand that. That does not require a formula. In fact, something that's too formulaic actually sucks the air out of the story. But I would say when it comes to a script, it's knowing why you are showing any given thing and why someone is speaking the lines, and having a sense that those things are flowing in a connected way by a consciousness. Doesn't have to be fitting a formula, but it does have to be following a path that an artist is consciously creating. That's what I would say is what makes you put it in good hands. There's a cool commentary Gary Whitta did for the Book of Eli, free at his page. That is actually interesting. There's a lot of stuff on the internet where people talk like they will tell you, I've done some of it, what they thought they were doing when they created. I don't know what to tell you. The topic of control has to do with the fact that the imagery, the story, everything in most movies made since the 1980s has focused on a very artificial understanding of how film works. In other words, it's about the artifice, the control, the creation. In other words, you never just light a scene in realistic light. You would throw a blue light on it to establish a certain mood, and you would, that there's a certain sense of, ideally, most filmmakers now, if they could, would build and control every element of their set. And that I'm saying that's a cool thing, but there is also something to finding your story and your art in the world. That's a really valuable thing that people are not giving value to. I don't know. We'll see. Capture will, I believe, the cool thing is that capture is now easier than ever. That the ability to capture a scene with your phone, you can take your phone and go out on the street and shoot a couple of people having a conversation and make a movie. You can do that. There's legal ramifications to that, and I am not a lawyer, but I would say most of the time you have more ability to capture than anyone in history has ever had. So just take advantage of that and screw AI and screw green screens. My first screenwriter docu in film was interviewing a graphic artist who had turned my city in Australia. Yes. There's the work of making stuff up is really cool. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm saying that the pendulum has swung so far in that direction that no one is even asking the question. What if we did a story where people just sat on the street and real people walked past? I wonder if budget level determines. Yes, the more they want it. Yes, this is exactly what I'm saying. The point about that is, yes, if you are working for 30, 40, 60, $100 million budgets, the demands for control are larger. What I'm saying is almost everyone who's watching this isn't doing that and probably never will. So therefore, I am urging you guys to remember that that part of the industry is just a part, and that the rest of it is there for you. That's what I'm trying to say. Photography is at its best and hardest when you're out on the street hunting for those state-of-the-art moments and managing the event. Yes, exactly. Documentary photography, documentary photojournalism, art, there's lots of versions of art. I was just trying to remind indie filmmakers that they do not have to try to pretend to be studios. Security camera. There's a reason that found footage worked for a while. And honestly, I think that there's something to be said for found footage. And I think that the problem is that found footage became a niche of horror. I'm waiting for the found footage rom-com, the found footage Western. There's a lot that you can do. I'm watching a captivating actor-actress, the background becomes less important. I would say that's true, and I would say captivating is always possible, and it does not have to be stars. Okay, well, let's stop with the comments. I'm going to try and catch through all the ones we got. As a professional photographer and beginning screenwriter, completely thank you. Actual reality is not happening to these, but it's there, and our lenses and our film stocks, our chips are faster than ever, and the variety is more available. It's more lightweight. The sound equipment is more effective. Our ability to capture reality, this is going to, I believe, explode in the next 10 years. I believe that this mumblecore, indie, on the streets, Cassavetes style filmmaking is going to come back hardcore because it's really powerful when there is an artist running it. What bothered me in the studio films, and it's tricky because I love studio films. I love the artificial films of today. I don't mind that. I just feel like that is something that you can only do with a studio. And most people don't have a studio. If you have a studio, do it. It's fine. If somebody says, here's the studio, make whatever you want, cool. But if you have no studio, remember, you don't need to look like a studio. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, no, it's tricky. It's tricky because the beautiful lighting that is achieved in some of these CGI movies is amazing. Yes, exactly. Neorealism in Italy in the 1940s. There was a period, post-war especially, like I had said, silent films in the 60s and 70s in Hollywood were influenced by, after the Second World War, in many countries, the war had devastated these countries, and their film industries had to work within that devastation. Especially Italy, France, Germany, and Japan all created film industries that worked within their raw reality, and they created some astonishing work. Some of it's boring, some of it's not too cool, but the language of it is immensely useful, and it should not be discarded just because they didn't have the best plots always. Yeah, thank you. I just thought of that. McKee earns his money from selling books and selling tickets to his lectures. Okay. Alex is talking about the fact that there is this new kind of technology in which you basically have a wraparound LED wall, and you can project. So it's basically a really fancy rear projected location background, and that is a cool thing now and then. It's a nice tool, but it does not replace the value, all the other values. It's just a tool. Realism, surrealism, impressionism, Dada, the capture control conversation has been going on for ages. And yes, this is absolutely true. And I will say I do not claim to be original. I just claim to be begging in the current conversation about filmmaking, because it is so desperately, frantically trying to appease the studio section of the business, find those jobs. It is not open to all the other values and languages and methods. And all I'm saying is studios are a big slice of the money, but a small slice of the work. And therefore, if you want to work and you can't happen to get into the big money, do the other thing. That's all. It's a pretty simple message. But yeah, no, not only that, but I happen to love all those debates. There was Impressionism is essentially capture. Impressionism, they said, let's go out to the streets and capture what we were seeing. They had to do it with paint. YouTube channels and creators must also struggle with the legal aspects. That's right. You put a Coke machine behind you and you wonder if YouTube will give you a strike. Yes, that is true. And once again, I am not giving legal advice. I do not ask you to do these things without reckoning for the ability of YouTube to take, copyrighted materials and logos and things. They can become problems. I would just say, think about it. Try and find the way, because there's got to be ways to capture. That's all I think. Hello, Sopol. Very nice to meet you. Capture spawns. Yes. Like I'm walking here. Yes. Absolutely. Okay. What Sopol is talking here about is, and there are multiple versions of this story. I do not know for sure this is true. There is a very famous scene in the movie Midnight Cowboy, which is a magnificent version of capture in the studio era. Midnight Cowboy is an unbelievably great movie in almost every way, and therefore I urge you to see it. But one of the things about it is there was an awful lot of shooting on the streets at the time. One scene, supposedly, Dustin Hoffman and Jon Voight are walking across a street. A taxi tried to drive, or a car tried to drive, and Dustin Hoffman pounds on the hood and goes, I'm walking here. That became a legendary line. The question is, was it improvised? There are times that I have heard people say it was improvised. I've also heard other people say that they were on the set and it was not, it was planned. I don't know. But it doesn't matter, because either way, the truth is, Midnight Cowboy is a remarkable example of using capture, using shooting on the streets, using real people as extras, using all those things, and then crafting within it a very clear sense, moment to moment, of what the drama is. Using that is a beautiful, powerful thing. I just did finish making an AI movie, short, cool. Yeah. No, I'm not saying don't do it. There may be times when I would want to, especially if, like with Winning Time or with The Mandalorian, you are working in a world that you can't capture. Or if you want to create a mood, that language is there for you. There's nothing wrong with it. About the legal issues, perhaps in non-public situations, you may have to mind portrait rights. Yes, certainly. If you are capturing a person, they have the right not to be put into your movie, and so you have to figure that out. One of the things that people do is they put a sign up on the street, and it says, "If you walk down this street, you may be in a movie," and then people have the choice. Yes, congratulations, Nacho. I am the best filmmaker advisor in the world. Don't you forget that. Okay. Okay. Yeah. The conversation is the conversation is a fascinating, very, very controlled within shooting in reality movie, and it's about capturing reality. So yes, the conversation once again was in that period in the 60s and 70s when filmmaking aesthetics, borrowed from, by the way, the Europeans and the Japanese 10 years earlier, 20 years earlier, had changed the rules, the formula of what was a workable story. Took a month to produce 5 minutes and 20 seconds. Yeah, that sounds right, but congratulations. That is very exciting. I feel like all the teachers of film school, no, some are good filmmakers. Also, some, just because someone is not famous or well paid doesn't mean they are not successful filmmakers. Your film teachers may be doing exactly what I'm saying. In their off hours, one of the reasons they may be teaching film is it gives them a little free time and access to equipment to make themselves some great little piece of personal art. It's all possible. I don't want to say, it's very easy to say, if you were good, you'd be rich and famous. That's simply not true. Okay. So Najo and Donna, you need to communicate to each other. You can communicate through me if you need to. Should the results of green screen encourage writers? You should just know it's a tool and just not feel trapped. That's really what it is. Okay. Yes, Arfung is right. Congratulations to everyone in the crowd who has made their work, has done written a draft. Even if you don't like it, if you've written a draft, that is a great thing. If you have created a short, if you have created anything, that is good. Yes, I have a lot of storage boxes behind me. Yes, Andy Warhol was raising the question of capturing. Indeed, and it's funny, the Scorsese in this interview in Gentleman's Quarterly, GQ, talks about Andy Warhol's sleep film as exactly that, is exploring the boundaries of filmmaking. And that's a worthwhile thing to do. Hey, I do my best, I have never, hello Majid, I have never seen a Tarkovsky movie. I have just never got around to it. I've heard they're really great. Okay. AI content can't be copyrighted, but the news this week, artwork copyright was not accepted. Yeah. This is a whole other section, a whole other question of whether AI can, the question would be if you got AI working for you, but it's taking other things, copyright becomes an interesting question. Okay. Ches is coming at the end again. Ches, get I'm on at 1. Okay. Try and squeeze a question. What do you do when you're in a rut? It's like I've got Brian Falcon, whatever it's, I can't see it. The short answer to that is, first of all, hold on, let me see if I can find this. Yeah, this one. Look at this video. This is one where I really talk about that, getting stuck or lost. So please take a look at that video. I'll put a link down in the description. It's not laziness. Laziness is a word that's not worth applying to creative work. You're not lazy. You may be intimidated. You may be just haven't figured out a good habit. You may just need to mechanically build a habit. There's a lot of different things that are going on there. I would suggest definitely see that video. The main thing about it is if you've got brain fog, I would say also look at this one, small steps, and this one, use what you have. In other words, if you're in a rut and you can't get anything done, focus down on one small place, one scene, one line. Just get something doing. The habit of opening the document and working within the system and getting a small bit done will usually break through a rut. Okay, and with that, I am going to say see you all next week. I hope that you all go write something.